Good morning. Welcome to day 3, you hearty souls. I know that a lot of getting out of Tahoe can be tough. I know a lot of you have a lot of flights at various times this morning, so I wanted to take this opportunity to thank all of you for being here, all the conversations that we've been a part of, and all of our speakers. You all came to play. I mean, I think one of the things that I love about our summits, and especially about the brands who were here over the last few days, is that they really understood the concept here, which is peer-to-peer sharing and telling details about their stories and the challenges that they face. That's what this really is about, conversation among marketers. And with that in mind, I want to remind everyone we regard our events as ongoing conversations. We've been doing this for 15 years. There are a lot of people who have been with us for many of those years. And a lot of it depends on getting the stories from you. So I really depend on marketers to tell me what they're working on. A lot of the stuff that was on stage over the last few days really came out of long conversations that I had with a lot of the people who were speaking, where we're sort of surfacing what are the pieces in these stories that really relate to other brands that other people want to hear about. And that's what I get jazzed on. That's the creative part of this process for me, but I think also the stuff that renders the content really well. My point being, if you have ideas, if you want to come back for the next one, or for some of our other events, like the upcoming TV and video event, or the direct-to-consumer event that we'll be having. We also have events around email and search and performance. I'd love to hear your stories. I'd love to talk to you about coming back and telling another aspect of this. You know where I am, stevesmith@mediapost.com. Just ping me. I'd love to talk to you. Also, of course, as I've mentioned before, we can't do this without our sponsors. And we really want to have a round of thanks for all of our sponsors. They too know how to play. Know how to play the Insider Summit game, and that means being low key, not assaulting you, but really being a part of the conversation, and also supporting the independence of what I get to do here for 3 hours every morning, and we really appreciate that. Again, as I mentioned, we have those upcoming events on Montauk, the TV and video event, and the direct-to-consumer event on Kiawah Island in South Carolina. If any of you are interested, or you think colleagues might be appropriate for them, again, ping me online. Love to hear from you. And again, the videos from the last 3 days will be posted online. You should see, if they're not already there, they will be over the next few days. You can go back to the agenda and pick them up there. You know, I started this event by mentioning that at least, although one of the challenges, of course, for consumer product goods and all of the, and especially now, is both the challenge and the opportunity is using these digital channels to get closer connection to consumers. But it also, I think, as we've also seen, is wrapped within this larger challenge, an existential challenge, I like to call it, because I'm an egghead, of whether brands matter. What does brand solve for in the 21st century? It's a big question. As I mentioned, there was a reason why brands even rose in the late 19th century. There's a reason why we had them throughout the mass-produced 20th century. But as we move into the 21st century, we're starting to see consumers wonder, do they really need brands? And it's a really important question. And I think we've already seen some of the answers. Some of the stories we've heard over the last few days were really interesting. You know, obviously there's one which is, can brands weave themselves into people's everyday lives? Can they be part of a ritual that people identify with something that's necessary or beloved in their lives? But then there's also, you know, whether brands can connect themselves to a sense of larger meaning, and whether they really can represent causes, movements, identifying themselves with something more meaningful than their own product. And then, of course, there's also, and I think we've seen this from a number of the CPGs, and maybe it's something that's particularly endemic for this category, is tying brands back and trying to restore what was lost in the 19th century, which was being connected to how things are produced, where they're produced, why they're produced, the passion with which they're produced. We heard a lot of stories over the last few days about trying to restore that connection. And I think these are all interesting. These are all interesting problems that marketers have to solve at the same time that they're leveraging and solving for all of these more tactical problems of channels and communication and media fragmentation. There's still this bigger umbrella issue of whether brands matter anymore and how do we make them matter. matter. And that sort of leads us into Trip Hughes' presentation from Organic Valley. I'm going to let Trip tell you about Organic Valley, but one of the things that I found really fascinating about this story, when Trip and I have already talked about this, Trip was at an earlier event, and I found this such a compelling idea, and the journey that they went through so compelling, I really wanted to bring it here. Because in talking about how Organic Valley evolves its media strategy, its creative strategy, it really is a very dense story about how it touches upon things like virality, the limitations and the strengths of social media, the limits and the strengths of different kinds of storytelling, and different ways of coming at branding. Trip Hughes is the senior of customer strategy at Organic Valley. He's going to tell you about both himself and the brand. Please welcome Trip Hughes.
All right, am I mic'd up? Is that going? Morning, everyone. Knowing that I had the morning slot, I've made this hopefully a fun presentation for y'all. I'm Trip Hughes. I've been with Organic Valley for about 20 years. I kind of grew up there. We started back about 31 years ago as a farmer-owned cooperative. The images that I'll show, these are our farms, these are our farmers. We're owned by about 2,000 family farms across the U.S. They are the owners. We report to them. Our board of directors may have milked cows in the morning and come to the board meeting during the day. We're primarily focused on dairy, but we also have some other what we call pools or areas that we focus in. We've got eggs, we've got feed that we grow, we've got meat, and there's a connection to that. And it's really, we've always described ourselves as a social mission disguised as a business. And what we've always said is that in order for our social mission, keeping family farms going, keeping organic acreage growing in the U.S., in order for that to survive, we need to survive as a business. We need to be viable. We need to be motivating and relevant with our audience. Probably about 50% of our sales are going to our Organic Valley brand. Crop is our parent company. It's the co-op of regional organic producers. We also do private label, manufacturing. So if you've had other private label and organic products out there with dairy in them, you could have been part of our. One of our big elements, though, is we're only organic. That's all we do. We believe that that really matters to the environment, to the animals, and to the consumers at the end of the day. And it is something that set us apart. From day one, we were telling our story about how we're farmer-owned and we're organic, and we believed that was as good as it got. But as we grew and as the market evolved, and here we are 30 years later, and you can walk into the Save Mart in Truckee and you can find organic products, just organic and farmer-owned wasn't enough. And I'll talk about that evolution. I have great respect for the other companies that work with farmers. Land O'Lakes. It's keeping families on the farms is super important to us. What we do is we do a very specific niche of that. So what we found over the years is that we're really good at building connections through video. And we've got, if you go to our YouTube page, and I encourage you to do it, we've got hundreds of these emotional, glorious morning shots with cows coming out on pasture. And we would social media the heck out of those, and we'd try to get them to go viral. And the reality was, it may be entertaining, it may be connecting people to our brand, it may be keeping people engaged with our brand, but it wasn't driving our sales up. It was keeping things steady, and we needed to rethink that. I love this stat. We have a full-time team of 3 videographers, and one of them calculated that people spent 59 years last year watching Organic Valley videos on YouTube. That's kind of scary. So what I'm going to do is share some of this engagement. What we realized was the marketplace was getting really crowded in other companies, and no offense to the companies in the room, telling the farmer story. And we're like, well, you know what, we've always done that, but the consumers are actually talking to us about more. Farmers still super important. It'll always be a part of what we do, but we need to break out of that boundary. So the first thing we did was probably about 5 years ago is we set this goal. Let's create these videos that will go viral. Let's knock it out of the park. I'm not going to show you one of our most viral ones because it's a little controversial in the Me Too day. But it's called Save the Bros, and if you have a chance, go check it out. It was funny then. Some of you may still find it funny now, but we don't push it. But I am going to share with you some of the other ones that we've done. So this one's fantastic. We worked with our agency, and we said, look, we're farmers, we're on the farms, let's get into our consumers' world. So we spent a couple of months surveying. We talked to about 1,200 busy women about their mornings, and we used those insights to drive this ad. So I'll share it with you now.
Like most women in commercials, I love to start each day doing yoga in my underwear.
Or journaling in my journaling nook.
And eating a wholesome, farm-fresh breakfast with a tiny spoon that I bought from a company that gives tiny spoons to underprivileged children.
Huh. According to science, most professional women don't have time for any of that.
Not that we need research to prove it, but there's research to prove it.
57% of us are up before the sun is up.
21% of us check our work email before even getting out of bed.
What?
Let's go get that morning meeting.
9% of women cite dry shampoo as one of the greatest inventions of the 20th century.
I'm done.
33% of us never make our bed. Like, ever.
21% of us have used an article of clothing to camouflage a stain. Very nice.
Only 16% of women would describe their morning with the hashtag blessed. And that seems kind of high.
58% of women will swear at someone or something this morning. Oh,
You know what 100% of us do have time for?
A real-life Pinterest board?
Fermenting your own small batch kombucha?
Propose? No, an organic breakfast in a bottle.
That's why we created Organic Balance.
Propose.
A nutritious organic breakfast with 16 grams of protein and half the day's calcium, so you can seize the cray. Find out what real women's mornings are really like at realmorningreport.com.
So that video went viral. You know, it took off. We tried a lot of different target audiences. A couple of them it really hit into. It shared, we pushed. It shared, we pushed. And so we got that video view up over 10 million, which was exciting for us. But again, it didn't move the sales for this product. You know, it helped, but it wasn't what we needed to break through and drive through. I'll share one more kind of fun one with you. This is one of our best-selling products. And again, this is us combining a little bit about who we are with what the consumer's interested in.
I guess you could say I'm a purist. If you want a quality product, you have to source the best ingredients out there.
And this is one of our
coffee
farmers.
Isn't just made, it's milked. My name is Garrett Van Tol. I'm an Organic Valley dairy farmer, but my real passion is coffee. If you want to be taken seriously in the coffee world, you need a tiny storefront in a hip neighborhood in New York City. I just saw a girl carrying a ukulele. Welcome to the Organic Valley Coffee Shop. You can order organic half and half in 3 sizes. A little bit, a double, or a lotta. Then you just have to add the coffee. It's over there. We're gonna need one of those modern logos with an X in it, or some arrows that says when you were established. I got a bunch of them here. This one seems very hip. The secret to a great cup of coffee is our pasture-raised cows. Hey, Molly, you gonna make me a good cup of coffee? Cows love grass, so we got a great blend for them. We have Matua prairie grass, comes from Argentina, and ryegrass from New Zealand. There's a real grassiness to it. Hey, foodies, it doesn't get any more local than that. She's like my secret barista.
Got a double for Gina?
We'll do double.
I'll buy 3 half and halves.
Lotta for Fred?
A little, I think.
Let's try double.
Double coming up.
It's a nice meal.
That is. Organic Valley happens to be the world's best coffee company. We just don't make coffee.
So this was some insight-driven work that the
Hipsters
agency
in New
brought
York
to us.
City love you, girls. Yeah, I agree.
So this was a merging of our world, something we had done forever, which was work with our farmers, and something that we needed to do was really get into the lives of our consumers and be relevant. Garrett had never been to New York City before we opened the coffee shop with him. We did it for a few days. He had a blast. We had a blast. Consumers were a little confused, but it was fun. So again, this is this evolution. This we tried to take viral. It didn't go viral, but we knew it had a good message. We actually have a 15 and a 30-second cut of this. And so we took it out and we pushed it programmatically and through a few other channels, and we started to get some momentum, and maybe we were starting to turn the scales with it. We decided, though, we needed to go bigger. And so I worked with our CFO, our media agency, my boss, the chief marketing, and we went to our board and we said, hey, you know what? It's time for the farmers to dig into the pockets a little bit. We know it's a tough time, but we know we've got a story that's authentic. We know we've got a story that resonates with folks. Let's go out and do it. And so last time I talked, I didn't share too many metrics, so Steve asked me to bring some in. You know, we had this goal of hitting 90% of our target audience in the US. This is a big goal. We've got 60 million plus that we're thinking about out there reaching. And our goal really was to make sure we were moving these brand health measures all the way down the funnel so that at the end of the day, we saw velocity increase. We saw new household penetration. And we were able to drive our purchase intent up by 155% through this concentrated campaign. What we did, though, is, again, we decided that we needed to position ourselves as a truly different food company, not just showing farmer videos, but getting out there and making a statement, making a difference. And so this is a campaign that we call Us Crazy. The first video I'll show is one of our top performing videos. It's called Fitbit Cows. And the second video is this long form. And what I'll talk about is through our targeting, through our retargeting, through our work with our media agency, by the time people found and got to our long form video on YouTube, many millions, we had a 90% completion rate on a 2.5-minute video. So let me get into it and share these two with you.
Some food companies put smiling cows and green pastures on their packaging, even if they're actually kept in confinement. Not cool. But at Organic Valley, we put smiling cows in our fields, where they belong. And to prove it, we put these fitness trackers on our cows, so you can actually count the steps they take in our green pastures. Turns out they take more steps than most people. Looking good, ladies. Letting cows be cows. Call us crazy, but it's working. Organic Valley.
So again, it was trying to find this mix, this blend between who we are and what our consumers are interested in thinking about and locating. So this next one then is if you've been primed, if you've come into our world, we're going to share with you this longer form. And again, the success rate of a 90% completion on this is crazy. Everyone in this is real. This is Jerome. We call him the Wizard. He is one of our founding employees. He was the visionary who decided our co-op was going to be different than other co-ops. And I'll let it speak for itself.
This is the crazy story of what happens when a bunch of idealistic farmers decide to start a company. It's the story of Organic Valley. You've probably heard of it, but maybe not. As far as names go, it's pretty boring and easy to forget. And that's how beauty shots are made.
I came up with the word Organic Valley. I said, this is easy, people can understand it, it's really not that creative.
We're not a very sophisticated bunch.
Yep, somehow this company with a forgettable name that was started by just 7 organic farmers
I'm one of the founding farmers for Organic Valley.
in the middle of nowhere, Wisconsin, has lasted for 30 years. And today they deliver ridiculously fresh organic milk, eggs, cheese, butter, and cream to families all around the country. But wait, let's back up. This whole thing got started because of this guy.
Okay.
Back in 1988, George was a long-haired, shoeless hippie farmer. He and his farmer buddies were sick of the way food was being grown with toxic pesticides and how farmers were being treated. And he was saying radical stuff like,
The conventional food that you buy in the store is food raised in a manner that's harmful to the earth.
That's pretty wacky.
Georgie is stubborn, but he's also a very reasonable person.
So George and 6 neighbor farmers decided to start an organic cooperative, which meant the farmers would own and run the company and make food that's better for you, the animals, the land, and your taste buds.
Yeah, that's a real important thing.
Let's just say in those early days, it was kind of like the Wild West in organics, or the Wild Midwest, we should say.
I was the first chief financial officer, although we didn't call me that.
We did not have any money.
All of us made $5 an hour.
It was day-to-day living.
A couple of years later, some of us went up to 7.
We were never worried about success. We were worried about trying.
Since then, Organic Valley has grown a lot. Over 2,000 small family farmers have joined the cooperative, and all they do is make organic food, the way they would if they owned the company, which they do, which means no hormones, no GMOs, no antibiotics, and no toxic pesticides. And animals get lots and lots of time out on pasture. Crazy, right? And remember that young, idealistic farmer, George? Well, he's still a long-haired, shoeless farmer.
I got a reputation to maintain.
But now he's also the CEO, who drives a hybrid car to work, because that's what happens when a bunch of farmers own the company.
The theme is let's do it our way.
So if you're a person living on planet Earth who sometimes eats food, here's why you should care about this story.
We cannot afford to be degrading our lands any longer.
Small family farms are much more invested in the health of the soil, the health of the animals, the health of the people. It's much more intimate.
Organic Valley is all about promoting that care and supporting that.
Yep, a food company that's owned and run by a bunch of organic farmers. Call us crazy, but it's working. Organic Valley.
So that was our prime campaign. We're running it now. It's performing pretty darn well. I'll share some of the success measures with you. And we really think it's hitting that right spot where it's telling our story for sure, but it's also connecting with relevance into the consumers in their food world and the choices they're making, especially young moms as they're out there making choices for the first time. You know, we have this saying, hey, it may be too late to save me, but I'm going to do anything I can for my kids. And I think that's pretty relevant. News is it's not too late to save all of you either. So there's some good information out there about that. So what we did is said, okay, so how do we support this with the videos that we're constantly making? We've got farmers out there with cameras. They're constantly sending us fun content. We've got our editing team in-house. They're going out on farm. They're reviewing the farmer stuff. And every once in a while, we get a winner. So I'm not going to name names, but there was a dairy company recently. They took a big hit for some of their animal abuse that happened. And that's an unfortunate thing for all of us. That's a terrible thing to happen to farmers. It's a terrible thing to happen to the dairy industry. And I can't guarantee it wouldn't happen on one of my 2,000 farms with somebody having a bad day. But the reality is we take a lot of precaution. We take a lot of measures to try to make sure it doesn't happen. It's not a norm for us. This is a norm for us. And so we wanted to share during that period of kind of doom and gloom in the dairy industry, we wanted to share a little bit of a bright spot. And the reality is this could be my farm, this could be one of Brandon's farms, but this is, we believe, how dairy could be. So this started out as a social media post. It got enough play that we re-edited it and brought it into actually being a 15-second spot that we've brought out into some of our larger format media. This is Rosie.
Hey, Rosie. Go play.
At Organic Valley, we think animals deserve to spend their days outside on organic pastures. Call us crazy, but it's working. Organic Valley.
So again, it was something where we're trying to make sure that we're constantly staying relevant, paying attention to what's happening in the marketplace. Somebody asked in the roundtable the other day, what's your strategy for preparedness when things go bad for you or for your marketplace? And we tend to turn to our own stuff and try to figure out that story. We tend to try to stay positive even when it's a negative kind of environment out there. So that was my high-level storytelling. Now I'll talk a little bit about what we did. So it wasn't just media, but media drove it. We know that through awareness, we were driving both our retention of the high-value consumers we wanted to stay with the brand. We actually got some trip increases, which was fantastic. We also found that we were able to recruit new families at a time when the dairy industry as itself is contracting. But we did that not just through the videos, we had integration. All of our touch points were working together to get back to talking about the high quality dairy that Organic Valley delivers. And this is an eye chart, but I figured if folks were gonna be getting a leap behind, they could get it. It's confidential, internal use only, right? But I did vet it that these are numbers that are okay to share. So we got out there, we reached about 96% of our 61 million target. And we hit them a bunch of times. And that was the first time we were able to do that. When we were viral, we'd hit them once, they'd share it. Maybe they'd watch it twice, they'd share it. And that was not enough to change consumer mindset. And what was even more important was our media agency who came to us originally saying, video's dead, or TV's dead, we're gonna do this all through programmatic, we're gonna kill it, social, it's hot. And our media agency is a fantastic agency. This is a few years ago. They said, but we're going to have TV in here, and we're going to do a market mix model, and we're going to see how things work. So we did. As I mentioned, we saw some really great increases across our brand health metrics. We have always been the #2 player in the dairy set. We were actually able to surpass or come close to our behemoth competitors on a lot of these measures, and that was super exciting for us, super exciting for the board as well. But this is where I really got excited, and this is kind of something that shocked our agency. TV actually drove a large part of what we were doing, and in part it had to do with this fact that probably we're a broad set dairy company, so we've got products in multiple categories. We're in high penetration categories, so we've got households, dairy, 98% range. And TD was talking about the purchase frequency. We're high frequency. Dairy's often getting purchased 2 times a week in most households. And so those components, plus our distribution capacity, really made TV take off for us in a powerful way. And it's performing well on Hulu, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook. Programmatic, we're going back to the agency and we're going, guys, what's going on here? We know that our targets are working because we're working with them through Facebook, through YouTube. But the programmatic, our piece, we certainly have some work to do. We do think that there's potential that we didn't have the right creative in the right place. And that's something we're going to go back and explore. But overall, it's been a great learning journey. We're about to meet with our agency partners again in a couple of weeks here and get ready for round 2 next year. But I appreciate the opportunity to share, and I think I might have time for a question.
I do. Tripp, that was great. Thank you so much. And your farmer did actually see a woman with a ukulele in New York.
Oh, yeah.
New York. You were grabbing real shots from him responding to New York.
What I love, our creative agency is Human out of Chattanooga, and they overshoot everything, and then they go edit it all together. So, yeah, that was real. That was unscripted.
We have time for questions. Yeah, hang on. Go ahead.
Great presentation, thank you. And we have similar industries. We're in the same industry and similar business models. So I'm interested in knowing, you mentioned that you reached 61 million users 15 times, I think. So what methodology do you use to know that those were actually unique users and not the impressions based on frequency instead of reach of unique users?
You're asking a great question. I can't answer that in detail. But working with our media partners, first of all, most of the broad reach is coming through TV, right? And so I'm not able to tell you that I got unique users on the TV, right? So we're using metrics from TV, we're using metrics from cable, we're using metrics from Hulu, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and compiling those all together. So I don't think that perfectly answers your question, and the answer is, do I know I exactly got unique on 61? No.
And then the next question that is linked to that one is, what is your target demographic? So that makes you think that is 61 million.
Yeah, I mean, in general, we're talking to a group that we call the conscientious consumers. And so these are folks who care about where their food comes from. how it's raised, what they put into their bodies. They're interested in what they're serving to their family and friends. And so it's a group kind of between the organic parents group and these other folks who are just, they read the label, you know? They want to know where that food came from.
That's how I keep my girlish figure.
That's right. I love the fact that you elevated your, let's just say, quote unquote executive team in that longer video.
Yeah.
Did you find, was that really deliberate, especially considering that that the industry was under pressure from perhaps some bad players in the place? Because when you look at the Wizard, you're like, there's no way that guy's gonna screw you over, right?
Yeah.
Or your founder,
or George, yeah.
Right, and so was that a conscious decision of like, we got to get these guys in front of the camera because they transcend. What am I trying to say? Culpability or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, good question. So it probably wasn't conscious in that regard. It actually grew out of an initial concept was we're bad at business, but it's working. And the reality is from day one, our farmers, our business model has been told, no way you guys can farm organically. That can't happen. You can't feed the world, you can't support. And we've constantly proved that wrong. And we get great yields. We have great diversity in extreme weather. So moving into the business model, we've always had this philosophy of being the underdog, of doing things a little bit differently, of people constantly telling us, you guys are crazy the way you do that. And so part of this bad at business was, hey, the farmers actually run this company, you know, not the CEO. It's kind of the other way around. I mean, the CEO is obviously running the business, right? And so that was more of the context of this isn't business as usual. Some of our other videos that are part of this feature kind of the boardroom where the executives are making decisions and laughing as the graphs go up, right? So do you want your food made by that kind of a company or do you want your food made by that kind of a company? That's what we were going for. So maybe kind of what you're saying, but not exactly.
Were you in moving towards the final strategy, excuse me, were you shifting money towards overall branding or because some of the earlier pieces were really more product specific?
Yeah, so that's a fantastic question and one we struggle with. Overall branding for sure. We realized we had an opportunity to move much more dynamically as a brand and then bring in certain components. And as we come down the funnel, as we get into YouTube, as we get into some of the social channels, as hopefully we can do with programmatic, we can get much more customized at talking about kind of what we call our lower funnel products. So talk about ghee down there, talk about half and half down there, but up top to be a little bit more hero.
And what did you learn about, or sort of reflect a little bit on what you learned about social virality, where it does work, what it takes to make it move the needle in the end? Because you started out where you had great viral success that simply wasn't doing anything for you. But ultimately you were able to get some viral traction that did do something for you. What was the difference?
I mean, I think there are times when virals, if you can, first of all, asking an agency to do viral after viral is impossible, right? So, but if you can work to this place where you're staying fresh, where you're staying innovative, where you're staying relevant, whether it's in viral work or whether it's in your day-to-day work, I think that's the space that we were trying to go to. And so if something happens to take off viral now, great. It's not going to be our primary goal. We want to make sure we're communicating the core values. But at the same time, we're creating a lot of content. And every once in a while, like that Rosie video is going to take off.
Hi,
Hi,
I'm Uli. Yeah, with Pomois. I personally love that you are expanding the story from the farmer into other aspects because my 35-year-old daughter, who's now becoming a mom, really cares about everything. And, you know, it's much more involved in organic farming. Like as an example, that amount of land where you don't put fertilizers and pesticides into it. August is American or International World Quality Month to awareness that the water quality has so decreased, and that's why nobody drinks from a faucet any longer. But it's really because of the fertilizers and pesticides that go into the land, and I think you have contributed. It's not as bad as it could have been if you wouldn't made a change 35 years ago. So I think there's so many angles where you can start educating about how organic farming makes a difference, not just healthy cows and not abusing animals and, you know, supporting farmers. There's so many stories. I wonder, how did the coffee story work out compared to the cow stories?
Actually, the coffee story itself performed pretty well once we got it going.
Yeah.
And, you know, again, I think it's that mix of a story. We have acres and acres of material on our website that goes super deep if you want to go. But the reality is we need to get folks into that conversation first.
Yeah, I think to make it part of what you put into something, the ingredient, make it better. I think that's a lot of things how, you know, people learn too about the product.
Yeah. Well, thanks.
Hey, Trip.
Hey,
Dane
Dane.
here. Great presentation. Well, first of all, great presentation from everybody. This is the first time I've been talking. Great job. Question for you. Obviously, dairy is the primary product that you guys are working with cheese and milk, half and half, all that. Would you ever, because you are set up on a organic platform, get into more of a meat business, like with chicken and then beef? Is that something on the horizon, or is that not what you're looking to in the future?
No, you're asking a great question. The reality is we do have a meat company. It's a wholly owned subsidiary. It's called the Organic Meat Company. Our branding on it needs work. We've got two primary brands that we run. One is called Organic Prairie, and the other one is called Mighty. And Mighty Organic is basically some jerky, some great beef sticks, some meat bars. The reality is we think we need to bring that in a little bit closer to Organic Valley so that the consumers can make that connection. Originally, they were set up separately due to governmental regulations and stuff. But yeah, I mean, the reality is at the end of the day, our farmers need to be able to sell the cows once they're past a milking age. Our milking age extends usually pretty long, so that's fantastic. But the cows will move into meat, right? And so to have a continued market we now own a couple of plants, and we work on the mantra for that meat company of one bad day, right? They live a great life, and they serve this greater purpose for us.
Thank you. Hi, Parisha from Smith Design.
Hi, Parisha.
Hi. So, you know, we've been doing a lot of research on Gen Zers and millennials, and they talk a lot about how they're, you know, like they have really high BS meters, you know, they're extremely conscious when they're making, you know, the decisions about brands that they're going to be loyal to or just generally making purchases. You know, what did the brand or, you know, the media agency sort of see in terms of response from like the younger people? I mean, they're not necessarily able or even making those purchases quite yet, but, you know, you're kind of planting the seed, right? So, you know, and, you know, being that your target demographic is conscientious consumers?
Conscientious, but yeah.
Yeah. You know, did you guys sort of like get a vibe that, you know, they were, you know, impacted in some way, or, you know, you're sort of planting the seed? Yeah, just kind of curious about, you know, the response from them in general from your content.
Yeah, I mean, so millennials, Gen Zs as a whole have more attention to where food comes from, have a much higher BS level. So we purposely work with a creative team that's in that mindset. And we purposely are trying to not take ourselves too seriously. And when we take ourselves too seriously, we've got a lot of serious videos out there, and you're welcome to watch them. But that's not going to be the breakthrough video. It's not going to be the one that we're necessarily going to greet you with. But you may encounter it, and that may be the one that resonates with you. So we do have kind of a broad scope of the different emotions we're looking to tweak to bring people in. But we know that BS factor is huge, right? And so that's part of why, you know, they said, well, get Jerome and George on the camera and break that BS factor down a little bit. Now, the reality is a lot of people are going to look at that and not believe that's our founding CEO and our founding CFO, right? But they are, yeah.
Well, Tripp, next time, bring the wizard with you.
Yeah,
We'd
yeah.
love to meet him.
Well, thanks, you guys.
Tripp, thanks so much. That was wonderful. So let me ask Nina and our panel to come up. Over the last several days, we've been talking a lot about data and about the challenge that CPGs have always had in gathering first-party data on their consumers because their relationship with that consumer is so attenuated, and of course all the channels that now are open to it. And it always has begged the question, as we've moved more into a digital era, we've seen brands of all kinds wanting to bring more of this in-house, have greater control over the data, greater control over their media destiny. As we've seen, we've had several stories over the last few days about the necessity of being fleet and quick and how much that takes things being in-house. So I wanted to have one of our final sessions today on that general question of in-house versus outsourcing. And because it's a story that just over the last few years has evolved. I've spoken to a number of brands that actually started in-housing in a major way several years ago. They've actually shifted course and moved back. So there are a lot of lessons to be learned across different categories and different types of companies and different types of agency relationships. To lead this discussion, someone you probably already met, Nina Lentini. She leads our event content here. That means she's the one who has been live blogging all of our material. She also writes our case studies. Long career in this trade at Adweek and longtime editor of our own Marketing Daily. Nina, and also two returning members who've been to previous summits, Colleen and Kristen. Nina, take it away.
Good morning. Thank you. This marks actually my beginning of my second year in events. Lake Tahoe last year was my first event, and I'm increasingly just rewarded by comments made by people out of the blue to me about how wonderful these events are and how a lot of people here are here for the first time, and they're so amazed that they get to talk to the presenters after the presenters leave the stage and interact with them. So this is something that I'm really glad to see when I come to these events, that there's people that are happy to be here, like you guys are back. So Colleen is Global Media Planning and Activation Lead at Electronic Arts, and Christina is Director of Global Digital Marketing at Keen Footwear, which I'm really keen on because I bought these like the last time I heard about Keen here, and I can't take them off. So it's been a lot of fun talking with her about that. So we have heard about people, companies that are wrestling with the question of whether they should keep their marketing entities in-house or outsource them, and what kinds of outsourcing should they do. I think it was Yvonne from Avocados from Mexico who said that in order to keep down the internal politicking, that they outsourced a lot of things so that they could keep control over that in-house and just let other people do it without getting involved in management politics. And that works for them. Other people want to have everything in-house, have all their data under control, which is obviously something that most marketers want to do. Let's start with Christina. So you told me that you primarily outsource with a tiny bit of do-it-yourself?
That's correct, yes.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, so we, here at Keen Footwear, we outsource most of our paid search, shopping, social, display, probably like, if you outsource it all, that's usually what it is, at least in the digital marketing space. What we keep in-house is actually probably more by accident than by intention. And I think we were talking about this last week, and that's because our process is not as great as it could be. And so the ability for us to turn things around, assets in particular, thinking about creative like images and videos, to turn that around to our media partners in a timely fashion for them to actually be able to activate in a manner in which they feel confident that the quality of the work that they're doing isn't being compromised. That's where our challenge is. And so we know that if we can't, for example, get in, whatever the asset is to our partners within 48 to 72 hours of going live, by default, that means we have to take it on ourselves. And so we have done, we do go out with display, we do go out internally with social, and then there are times when even just the editing of a video, we will keep that in-house just for expediency.
Yeah, it's easier to have control over the process when it's in-house.
It is. Transparently, I don't know if it's the optimal process, but it's certainly where we just have to land sometimes because of how we are.
Right. Okay, Colleen, how's it going over at EA?
Yeah, so we also kind of have a hybrid approach, and for me, on a personal level, having spent over a decade on the agency side, working on a brand who took everything in-house while I was working on it. I was very eager to go to the brand side, especially a brand like EA, who is fairly advanced in the space of in-housing. We had our own tech stack, owned our own first-party relationships for quite some time before it actually became a big trend, and also had a full in-house team of programmatic and search and social buyers across the globe. So that was really exciting for me, and in my over a little bit of a year at EA, we've actually transitioned with our new global agency partner to loosening up the reins just a little bit in terms of the actual hands-on keyboard work.
Is this the new agency that you just hired? Okay, and tell us how that's working.
It's going well. We're giving up the reins mainly on the hands-on keyboard work. So the actual busy work, which has really allowed my in-house media team to upskill themselves and do more things like cross-channel planning and really understanding the value and potential of our first-party audience data and connecting in meaningful ways with our players. So for us, it wasn't really about the in-housing movement. It was just a natural evolution of our marketing team. Knowing that we had all of these tech contracts in-house, it made sense to make sure that we had that expertise in-house as well to manage those.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
How about you, Christine? You said you could echo some of that commentary there.
I could. Yeah. Well, to be really honest with you, Portland is kind of an interesting market in and of itself. And that's quite frankly why while we are agency for most of what we do, for some of the amazing brands that are in our backyard in Portland, like Columbia, like Nike, like Intel, the digital marketing talent is virtually non-existent. So, when I have tried to hire externally, it takes months and months and months and months and months.
Right.
And even for fairly junior level roles, you find you have to then ultimately be willing to reload potentially, which suddenly makes what seems like a very junior role start to feel a bit more senior just because of the additional effort. So at least in the Portland market where I've been the past 2 years with Keen, the agency model is almost a necessity versus in-house. I would love to have a few more bodies in-house. To your point, I think the hands-on keyboards, getting rid of that and being able to just focus more on the thought process. But I just don't think that's going to be a luxury we'll have in Portland anytime soon.
How do you communicate with this agency? Email, Slack, text?
All of the
calls?
above,
Okay.
yes. My primary agency for digital marketing, at least, one of our primary agencies is in New York City, so 3 hours away. So we have gotten very good about the non-in-person, non-phone call comms, simply because 4 o'clock my time is 7 o'clock their time, but sometimes that's when the email goes out and needs to get responded to. But we do whatever we can to make it work, and so there is Slack, there's text, there's emails. We have a weekly status call, weekly report. You name it, we've probably done it.
Wow, I think you're doing it too, right?
Yeah, we are. One of our themes for the year has been bringing the outside in, and I'm sure a lot of other brands can relate. Once you spend a certain amount of time at a company, you get pretty indoctrinated into the ways of doing things. So for us, with our newly selected global agency partner, a part of our new model is actually embedding their talent in our offices across the globe. So we have 5 to 6 people sitting with us here outside of San Francisco and London, and that's really changed the way that we work with them. Being able to turn my chair around and ask questions and get ideas in real time has been hugely beneficial, especially for us as EA, where a very fast-moving company, as is the gaming industry as a whole. So having those bodies there in real time to kind of think things through has definitely changed the way that we've operated with our agency.
Okay, I know we also talked about the RFP process when we were on the phone there last week. Tell us a little bit more how it works with your agency.
Yeah, so the agency that we're working with now, we've been working with for 1.5 years. So I went through an RFP process not quite 2 years ago to find a new paid media agency. And to me, that, when you think about how you're going to build a relationship with your outsourced agency, to me, it actually starts with the RFP process. To the point that the transparency that you may provide in that documentation that you send over may be a little too transparent. But at the end of the day, you're looking for a partner who understands your business needs and your challenges, and at some point along the way will get it in the way that an in-house person would get it. And so to me, that means being really, really transparent, starting with the RFP process. And I believe I've come from a background of been really fortunate to work with some people over the years in project management who had a really rigorous process, great documentation that they've been very kind to let me steal with pride, as we used to say at Google. And so I've taken a lot of that documentation and morphed it over the years to my needs, both in terms of the initial documentation that goes out, as well as the documentation that we use internally to then ultimately evaluate the respondents. But to me, that's the opportunity to not only learn as much as you can about the agencies, but it's their first chance to really start to learn as much as they can about you. And it's like the equivalent of going on a first date or a series of first dates, right? To where, yes, you're putting your best foot forward, but you also need to scratch beneath the surface just a little bit and start to get to the nuts and the bolts of who that company is and what makes them tick, and can we have this relationship and will it work in the long run?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. It sounds very much like a relationship.
Yeah,
is a relationship.
it is, indeed, yeah.
How about you?
Yeah, we just actually finished our global agency search, which was a multi-month process, and I think similarly we were extremely forthcoming, probably to a fault, mainly because we wanted them to know what they were getting into. As I said before, EA is a very fast-paced organization. Actually, as a part of the briefing process, we had our CMO come in, which we thought would be a little 15-minute intro on who EA is, what we stand for as a marketing organization. He ended up speaking for over 90 minutes and probably sharing way more than we anticipated him to. And at the same time, a part of our brief was giving them a brief for a title that was live in real time, and then 2 hours before their submission, changing the parameters completely, which is much like our day-to-day in the media world at EA. So I think they knew what they were getting into, which has helped the relationship from the start.
Great, great. Well, I think we've touched on some high points here. Are there any questions that you'd like to ask of Christina or Colleen? I see one over there.
Hi, Dean Jackson, Life Extension. You mentioned the asset side, the digital assets. This is a question for you guys or anybody here, actually. Have a digital asset management system that you've installed, and can you comment on, if you have, how you've in turn used it for machine learning or personalization?
We do have a dam, but we don't use it for that reason. So I'm going to have to say I can't help you there. I'm intrigued by the question, though.
Yeah, similarly, with kind of managing our own tech stack, that includes our dynamic ad servers, includes our video ad servers. So while we are giving up the reins a bit in terms of the actual executional work, it's our agency, the ones that's doing the trafficking. From a personalization standpoint, that's something that I have an entire team dedicated to focusing on actually at EA. So they are responsible for understanding who our players are and making sure that we're serving the right message at the right time.
Right up front.
Hi, I'm Rachel. I'm from Simplify. I'm curious from both your perspectives, because you guys are kind of hybrid in some way, that you like to control some things in-house, but you also trust your agencies to do what you hired them for. When you have a new campaign upcoming, how much are you collaborating with your agency in determining what vendors they move forward? Or are you like, it's, you know the brand well enough, you can make that decision on my behalf? Or do you guys actually collaborate on things like certain platforms you want to use, or even your media mix?
Yeah, so for EA, it's extremely collaborative. Every step of the process, from the start of the brief, from the brainstorm that happens after the brief, happens with my local planning team in all of our offices with their counterparts at our global agency. So it's not a type of thing where we brief them, they go away for 6 weeks and come back for this big aha moment. We don't like surprises, so we're very involved every step of the way.
I think for me, a slightly different experience. I think most of my activation is lower funnel direct response. And so by default, the landscape of partners that you can work with, especially in a fast twitch manner in which you might be looking not only at always on activity, but the occasional new campaign. The spectrum's pretty narrow, but at the same time, we are quite collaborative. I was a practitioner for years before kind of stepping away from the doing and then just discussing. So I like to stay quite close, but I also trust my agency to make some really smart decisions once I've given them as much information as I can about whatever the project is.
Christina, how are you monitoring brand safety? If you're doing a lot of direct response, I presume you're using a lot of programmatic channels. How are you checking, keeping an eye on brand safety and placement?
That is a great question, and I almost hate to answer it honestly, to be honest with you. We don't do as good of a job as we should. And it's particularly challenging in our environment because first and foremost, Keen is a wholesale brand, and so we have a slew of wholesale partners at our that sell our product and also sell our product through digital means. And so transparently, that is something we should be better at because while we do monitor things like price in the marketplace very aggressively to ensure that that's sticking to the policies that we've established for pricing. On the brand side, we have not established policies that are as specific as they should be. So that's actually some work that we've got to get better at, and it's on my radar for sure.
Do you have only one agency across all the disciplines, offline and online, or you have specialty agencies? And also, how do you divide the roles and responsibilities of your teams to manage the relationship with your agency or agencies?
Yeah, we have one single global media agency. It was a big kind of debate internally when we started the RFI process for our new agency partner on does it make sense to have local partners depending on their strengths and expertise in different markets, but ultimately decided based on volume and investment and consistency from a global standpoint, it made sense to consolidate all with one agency. And then I think a part of that in terms of managing that relationship, we've set up local planning hubs. So each of the countries and regions that we manage, I have a local planning team that's responsible for managing their agency counterparts throughout the planning process. I also have a global biddable team that's based in New York, which is really nice for us from a time zone perspective, because half of our media team is outside of London and Guildford. The other half is here outside of San Francisco. So having that global biddable team in New York sitting side by side with the traders that are actually hands-on keyboard has been really beneficial for us.
3 different agencies. I'll be really transparent. The ecosystem at Keen, particularly given our size, is not as clean as it should be. We have one external agency who's focused specifically on lower funnel activation and is focused primarily on one category, but also kind of the brand as well, but still very lower funnel. We have another agency who focuses on one other category and branding at the upper funnel level. And then we have a third agency who focuses on yet one more category. So just to be really honest, we've really overbaked it. It's 2 agencies too many, and I think we all agree internally that it's 2 agencies too many. While things seem to be going as well as they can, all things considered, I know we're falling all over ourselves. We're probably creating some internal or some even external competition, say in an auction, for example, that shouldn't exist. Cookies are probably getting a little confused at times between the different partners, so it's not as clean of an ecosystem as it should be. So I would certainly say take it as a cautionary tale. Whenever you have the option to go with one agency that can manage everything, for the love of all that's holy, please do.
This is a question for Colleen, but Christina, I just have to tell you, I love your candor in all of this. This is like
Thank you.
You're not sugarcoating things, and I think that that's exactly what everyone likes to hear. Colleen, I want sort of a live case study. I'm curious about Twitch, which is just so native to your world, who is leading or led, I assume, your involvement in Twitch? Was it from EA? Was it from your agency? Where's the expectation? Was it fully collaborative? You know, because that's nobody has experience, right? So it's like, okay, we're gonna have to do this together. I'm just curious about the idea origination, and then how are you pursuing something like Twitch?
Yeah, it's a great question. Because Twitch is so intrinsic to who we are as a gaming company, it's not just a media partner. They are involved in so many different facets of our organization, from PR to our competitive gaming division, that it's it's a largely EA-owned relationship. But when it comes to the actual RFPing for plans, our agency manages that. So it's a dual approach, but I would say it's more heavily led by EA than our agency.
I wanted to draft off my last question about brand safety to the larger question of transparency and accountability and conflict of interest. Since one of the issues around brand safety is that, especially when you're dealing with a lot of performance agencies, they don't have an inherent interest in necessarily overseeing this because they're making a profit on all the volume. Overall, of course, this has been one of the key issues involving brands and relationships with agencies. I'd like to know how each of you has had the conversation about transparency and accountability and aligning interests with your agencies.
Yeah, for EA, transparency was probably one of the biggest focus areas throughout our agency RFI process. We wanted to make sure that in terms of the agency's revenue model, it aligned with our own way of thinking about being very, very transparent. By giving up some of the reins of being hands-on keyboard, we didn't want to give up the reins of the transparency. So all of our contracts are still owned by EA. The DSPs that we're trading on are EA's own seats. So we still feel like we have that visibility and control.
So you're seeing the you're seeing the numbers. You're seeing the price, and you're seeing where the money's going.
We are. Yep.
I couldn't imagine that it being any other way, to be honest with you. So I think, to your point, I'm a pretty transparent person, for better or for worse. I also expect that reciprocity from the partners that I'm working with. But hopefully, starting with that RFP process, and then those first few months in which you're working together and really kind of establishing what that norm looks like, work really hard to make it clear what my expectations are. And I think, like Colleen mentioned, I probably over-communicate a little bit as well, but I very much look at my agency partners, whomever they may be, as an extension of my team. And so if that means I would have my team sitting right next to me having that conversation, then in some ways that's how I try to operate with my team, with my brand partner or my agency partner as well.
We're going to continue this in a roundtable at the end of the morning. Nina, Colleen, Christina, thank you so much. We're going to round out today with a presentation that's near and dear to my heart, Rust-Oleum. We were talking, I'd mentioned before this idea of brands trying to weave their way into people's everyday lives, and in fact, Rust-Oleum has woven its way into our everyday lives. The target of Rust-Oleum is my wife, we just bought a 200-year-old stone farmhouse in the woods of Pennsylvania. My wife is a do-it-yourselfer and a Pinterest freak. This is like Disneyland for her. And in fact, I have no idea what I'm going home to at the end of the week. And just last week, we took an old radiator out of the garage that hadn't been used in maybe 20, 30 years, and we pulled out a baseboard and put the radiator in and changed the heat over to radiator heat. My daughter came in and looked at it and said, "God, that's ugly. What are you going to do with that? It's rusty. It's old." And my wife just proudly looked at her and said, "Spray paint it, Rust-Oleum." That kind of linkage between a brand and sort of a set of everyday values and everyday habits. And again, my wife is sort of this persistent Pinterest user who's getting inspiration there. That's exactly what Lisa at Rust-Oleum is aiming at, and she's going to talk about the ways in which they're leveraging especially the social channels. She's going to introduce you to a new acronym that I had never heard before I spoke to her, called FOMU. I'm going to leave it to her to explain what that is. But this really is a good example of the ways in which a brand is trying to leverage both its legacy, memory, but the ways in which it simply weaves its way into the ways in which people are doing everyday work and everyday inspiring little tasks. Please welcome someone who oversees communications at Rust-Oleum, Lisa Bilecki. Lisa, tell us about Rust-Oleum.
A similar goal, right? We are all trying to target the right people with the right message in the right place, be really thoughtful about how we do it, be considerate about how we reach them. So Rust-Oleum is a nearly 100-year-old brand. We started with paint, but we're a whole bunch more. We're cleaners, we're car waxes, we coat factory floors and the Golden Gate Bridge and space shuttle boosters, and we have a stain line and all kinds of things. But today I'm going to talk about our core, which is spray paint. So a lot of us have talked about who our target audience is and who we really need to focus on. And we do have that passionate user, that Rust-Oleum user. If you've used spray paint before, there's this aha moment. We call it kind of the gateway drug into using DIY. But once you see that transformation, you spend like $5 on a can of paint and you make something look absolutely beautiful. And Pinterest, God bless, we are very happy to have that Pinterest as a partner of ours and a really endemic place for us to reach people who are already looking for our products. But we really need to reach that person who isn't aware. So right now, I was thinking about Kate the other day, and God bless her, she is busy, and she is not our target right now. She's on Wayfair.com during a conference call, and she's going to buy a new patio set, and she doesn't care. So we were like, Kate, you're on your own. Farmers, they love us. We keep their tractors looking good. We have a John Deere green. So we already have that category. But what we're really looking for is reaching a new generation of DIYers. So in the behavior, when are you really starting your DIY experience? It's when you buy your first house. So you put all your money into the down payment. You're probably a millennial, 32-ish years old. You have no idea what you're doing, right? But you're comfortable with DIY. So this generation, thankfully, has grown up watching HGTV and DIY. They love seeing the makeovers. They have a lot of style. They really care about how their home looks, how they look. But they aren't comfortable using spray paint. They can paint their walls, but they really aren't aware of what we're doing. They think of spray paint sometimes as graffiti, but not as a solution for a beautiful finish for the items in their home. So what's standing in their way to get them to think about spray paint? Well, if you think about millennials, they've grown up with Instagram, Facebook. Everything they have, they present to others, has to be perfect, right? So if you look at this slide here, their social expectations are so much higher than past generations. And I joke around with my husband, like, thank God social media wasn't a thing when I was 20 years old, right? Amen. Because, yeah, I can't even start. But the expectations are, and I look at my friends, children's Instagram posts, and everything's perfect. Everything's filtered. And so there's that fear of, not doing things perfectly. Doing a good job is a big deal. Things that they have and that they show are a reflection of themselves. And if they don't do it well enough, they're not good enough, is what they're feeling. So the human problem is more than anything they don't want to muck up. So we call it FOMO, fear of mucking up. And what we wanted to do here was eliminate that fear and just really celebrate the doing. So in our past campaigns, we did a great job of showing the before, the really rusty, nasty looking thing, and the after is so beautiful and on trend and colorful. But we didn't celebrate the experience. So, this audience is great at looking for things and researching on Pinterest and seeing things on Instagram. So they're always open to these experiences, but we really want them to feel comfortable doing it and set them up for success. So we developed a campaign called Pride in the Making that takes FOMO to spray confidence. And then once they try it, they're hooked, right? And they'll be our customer forever. So even though Kate doesn't have any time, she might have an event. So this is all behaviors, right? You have a new home, or you have a backyard party or graduation party, and all of a sudden you haven't done anything for 7 years in your backyard, and you're like, oh my gosh, I totally need to repaint everything and redo my, stain my fence and paint my patio furniture. But if they know our brand and they're comfortable with our brand, then they'll come to us first. So Pride in the Making is a campaign we just launched a month ago. So I'm sharing kind of some initial information about our media, but really focusing on the creative content here. So what we did was we leveraged consumer-generated content. And the reason we did this was in the past years, our creative agencies would come to us with this great mood reel and a pitch for an idea, and they used all this consumer-generated content to, give us an idea of how that would feel, and we all fell in love with it. And then we tried to replicate that with actors and music and highly produced stuff. And it was good, but it wasn't like the same thing. So we wanted that same thing, and they said, well, why don't we just use stuff that consumers create? So we did. And we tried to capture this look, a real person who has a real project. They're a little young, they're a little older, but they're really excited and happy about the process of doing it. And I do have to say, and we'll see this video in a little bit, it is so hard for a brand to let go like that. Like everything we do and everything you guys do, I'm sure, is the can has to be placed specifically so that the logo is very clear, and it has to be held in a certain, format, and oh God, they're doing it wrong, but we just had to let go, and it's very hard, and it's still a little bit hard, I think, for a lot of us. So we had a casting call video that we posted on social channels. We also have a private crowd that we use called Creator Studio. It's about 8,000 people who have participated with Rust-Oleum for the past 3 years. They're very passionate users of Rust-Oleum. We love them. They love us for the most part. They're very honest with their opinions, but they send a lot of their videos as well. So here's the casting call video. So a lot of fun. It's interesting, as working for a spray paint company, we get there's a lot of questions that are asked by our brand team that you wouldn't necessarily consider, like, do people know that's spray paint? Do they think it's hairspray? That was a question that was asked by a brand manager. So we took this content, we created a content hub. We wanted to make sure that everybody knew that it was paint, that everybody knew, there was a before and after. We also wanted to focus on kind of the basics of spray painting. Like, you have to shake the can for a minute, just like you would stir a gallon of paint to make sure that that paint is, evenly colored. And bright features that are followed with some video of real people, not holding the can the way I'd love him to, but he's still holding it and he's doing the job, and he's spraying and he's shaking, just like he's supposed to do. Using a Lazy Susan saves a whole bunch of time. You're not walking around your flower pot, you're actually, standing one place. It makes it a lot easier. But also not talking like a brand. So a lot of times we'll give instructions, we'll send people to a project card, we call it. And we would have a lot of very technical brandy words like, well, if your substrate is rusty, who uses the word substrate? Absolutely nobody but us. So we really wanted to just make it easy, make it simple. We leveraged some quotes from our crowd as well, talked about their passion for using our products. And then we brought it all together in our content hub on Instagram, making sure all those pieces work together. And also, featuring people from our crowd or from, just the general public, they love that, right? So they're sharing that with their friends. It's a nice way to make it like a mini viral. We also paired it with content created at our own content studio. So Kraft Heinz the other day mentioned they had 60,000 pieces of content, which was just amazing to me. And we have a lot of content, not that much, but we're creating content every day. We have a studio just about 3 blocks away from our headquarters, so we're able to go there and knock some things out pretty quickly. But even the content we develop ourselves, so you can see the lady painting in the frame on the top, that was developed in our studio, but we'd never focused on the smiles before. she'd never, just messed around and, joked afterwards. We just kind of focused on the thing. So it was really nice to transition from the thing to the pride. And then we also paired this with some banner ads and some social activation. So here is there's some Instagram ads. And again, this is the one where we were like, is that spray paint or is that hairspray? We're pretty confident it's spray paint. At the end, we shake the can. You always have to have your branding, but really celebrating the person and the item. And here we are with our digital banners. So we have some native and some weather-triggered banners. The native are performing very well. Again, it's very much the mindset you're in. So if you're not considering doing a project, or you're not considering, hosting an event or moving to a new home, you're not going to really relate to the ad. So we launched this a month ago. We feel very strongly that test and learn is a big component of our media. We're always working to make it better. The weather-triggered ad is my favorite. So you don't really want to spray paint if it's hotter than 90 degrees. You really don't want to be outside doing that. If it's colder than 60 degrees, the paint just doesn't work the way it should. If it's too humid, it doesn't work. So we can say, hey, it's a great day. Rays out, sprays out. Let's get out there and do something. And spray painting projects don't take long. So this is a culmination of all of this content. We called it an anthem video. That we're sharing. We have a 30, a 15, and a 6 cut down of this. Where we're running this next year is to be determined. I think it turned out really well.
That. You see that right there? That's something you didn't find in a store. This wasn't placed in a cart, shipped in a box, or found online. It takes a whole lot of this, and some of this, to create something so special that when people ask you where you bought it, just one look will tell them, I didn't buy it, I made it. Rust-Oleum, pride in the making.
So we love this one. We showed it to a customer just a couple weeks ago, and the customer said I had chills, and that was like my favorite. If I could make somebody cry out of happiness from seeing a Rust-Oleum ad, an ad about paint, that would be like my winning moment. So Ryan, do you mind? I'm going to share